Some kids aren't afraid of failing, they're afraid of your face when they do. Wow. It's a really tough thought, right? But listen, if you're a parent, taking just a few minutes to unpack this idea with us today could honestly fundamentally change your child's entire worldview.
So welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the psychology behind parental psychological control, evaluative fear, and the just absolute intense pressure modern kids are facing right now. We're going to look at where this profound fear of failure actually comes from, and we're going to do it with total honesty and a lot of compassion. Most importantly, though, we'll explore exactly how we can help our kids navigate it. Okay, let's just dive right into this.
Starting with Section 1, the perfectionism epidemic.
To really understand why this fear of disappointing others is climbing off the charts, we first need to look at what perfectionism actually is. Because, it's not just a harmless desire to get a good grade on a math test. Researchers Hewitt and Flett developed a really fascinating model called multi-dimensional perfectionism. They define it as a personality trait that combines excessively high personal standards with, overly critical self-evaluations. So the absolute crucial point here is that perfectionism isn't just striving for excellence. It is this punishing, exhausting cycle of harsh self-judgment that kids just get totally trapped inside.
Now, Hewitt and Flett break this trait down into a few different directions. First, there's self-oriented perfectionism, which is turned inward. This is where irrational, literally impossible expectations are placed squarely on yourself. Then there's other-oriented perfectionism, which is turned outward. That's when a person projects those harsh, unrealistic standards onto their peers, their friends, and basically everyone around them.
But the third type is absolutely the most critical for our discussion today. It's called socially prescribed perfectionism. And guys, this is the heavy one. It's the belief that your social context is excessively demanding and highly judgmental. Children dealing with this internalize the deeply painful idea that love, belonging, and approval are entirely conditional. They genuinely believe they have to deliver a flawless, perfect performance just to secure basic approval from the adults in their lives. And make no mistake, this exact type of perfectionism is quietly fueling some very serious mental health struggles in our youth. As the Chong meta-analysis clearly points out, socially prescribed perfectionism is positively associated with major psychopathology. We're talking about clinical anxiety, depression, and even suicidal ideation. When a child feels like they are constantly being evaluated and that love is strictly conditional on their success, the psychological toll is just immense. This is exactly why understanding this topic matters so deeply for all of us.
Moving on to the next section, rising expectations and criticism.
So you might be wondering, where exactly is all this intense, internalized fear coming from? To figure this out, we can turn to a massive meta-analysis by researchers Thomas Curran and Andrew P. Hill. They looked at the changing perceptions of college students over a staggering 34-year period. Yeah, 34 years, tracking the shifts all the way from 1989 to 2019.
And the data they uncovered? It is a huge wake-up call. Kern and Hill found linear, steady increases in how much young people perceive both parental expectations and parental criticism. To really humanize this data for a second, roughly 66%, so 2/3 of young people today, report higher perceived expectations than the average student did back in the late 80s. Just think about that. 2/3 of students today feel significantly more pressured and criticized by their own parents.
Which brings us to our next section, the macro-parenting squeeze.
Okay, if you're a parent watching this, please take a deep breath. I want to assure you right out of the gate, you are not to blame here. Parents are just reacting to a much larger, often unseen system. Research from institutions like the London School of Economics indicates that massive economic factors, rising inequality, and these hyper-competitive economies are actually what's driving modern parenting anxieties. Parents are essentially acting as society's, psychological agents is the term they use. You're terrified for your kids' futures in a really tough economy, and that totally valid anxiety inadvertently trickles right down to them. This economic anxiety creates a parental response that economists somewhat playfully call the rug-rat race. Just look at this dramatic shift in childcare priorities. From the 1970s to the 2010s, time spent on academic activities jumped from 3 hours a week to 8 hours. Meanwhile, free play decreased by 25% and parental surveillance went from low to high. We've drastically shifted our kids' time from independent, creative free play to intensively monitored, achievement-oriented tasks.
And the data proves this is directly tied to economics. The inequality factor is huge here.
Higher economic inequality perfectly correlates with parents increasingly valuing hard work and obedience. The very real fear of downward mobility forces loving, well-intentioned parents to push their kids harder. Without even meaning to, parents are essentially transmitting their own economic anxieties right into the minds of their children.
All right, let's talk solutions in our final section, structure versus pressure.
So the big question is, how do we protect them without breaking them? Let's zoom back into the living room to empower you. Researchers Sonins and Vensteinskid make a really vital distinction here regarding psychological control. You have dependency-oriented control, which uses guilt to keep kids close, and achievement-oriented control, which pushes them toward perfection. We really want to avoid those and focus instead on control as structure. Control as structure is healthy, its rules, its clear supervision, and its consistent routines. The wonderful takeaway here is that high standards can and absolutely should coexist with unconditional warmth. You do not have to drop your standards. You just have to drop the conditionality of your affection. Because honestly, when they don't coexist, we see what psychologists call parent-child asynchrony. This happens when a child feels their parent's love is strictly conditional on their achievement. And kids are smart. They absorb signals of conditional approval even in the absolute most loving homes. If your visible disappointment over a failed test or a missed goal is just a little too intense, they read that right on your face. They learn they are only as worthy as their latest success.
So let's put this into practice with some real actionable shifts. First, actively try to shift your day-to-day interactions from pressure to structure. Second, provide absolute unconditional warmth, regardless of how an academic or athletic event turns out. Third, intentionally disconnect your child's inherent worth from their daily achievements. Make sure they always feel supported, not scored. And finally, look, if you notice your child's worry or perfectionism runs deep, never ever hesitate to seek out a professional. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative question to chew on regarding your own household dynamics. How can you act as a buffer against a hyper-competitive society, rather than a conduit for its anxieties? Seriously, how can your home be a safe harbor from the storm rather than the storm itself?
It's definitely a challenging balance, but an incredibly worthwhile one to strike. And hey, if you're looking for tangible, science-backed resources to help your children build resilience, be sure to check out Fear Me Not. It's an absolutely excellent tool that helps kids conquer fears through science-backed play. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, stay focused, and always lead with warmth.